Hey y'all, it's David, and thanks for joining me for this video. First, before I get into the music stuff, Hearing Love book is out. If you have missed that somehow, then the paperback is available for order now. The ebook is on pre-order to be released on August 3rd. And so wanted to just remind you that it's available. This is my author proof copy, so this isn't the real copy. I haven't even received my real copies yet, but people are getting them already. I made them available earlier than the ebook in hopes that they would get there on the same day as the ebook, but people have been getting, for the last few days, people have been getting their books. I had a friend show up to the prayer room yesterday with a copy of it, and they're like, hey, my book came in. I'm like, oh, the first one I've ever seen. And so anyway, it's available for order on Amazon. The Kindle ebook is available for pre-order. And then some of you are waiting for the bundle for the signed copy. I am so sorry, we don't have any information out on that just yet. What we're waiting for is the mug to come in from Print and Mint, so we can video everything and take pictures of like what you're getting and everything, and then we'll make the announcement. But Print and Mint hadn't even shipped the mug yet. It's just one mug. Ship us the mug, please. And so that's all that we're waiting on. Once that comes in, then we'll let you know about the bundle and everything. So sorry that it's taken so long. But as soon as we know something, we'll get it up, film it, and put everything together. But it's on the radar. We're just waiting on that, and we'll fill you in when it gets in. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, which you probably got the sense of through the title or maybe the thumbnail, is also on pre-order with the book, is the Hearing Love soundtrack, which is available at forloveoftheword.bandcamp.com. All the links for the books and the soundtrack will be in the description. And then the soundtrack of the book will also be released on August 3rd for those who pre-ordered it. All the music playing underneath all my videos is just my own. I started doing that because I don't get into copyright stuff. People were asking me for the music, and so I just wanted to talk to you about the album for a little bit. I've never done a project like this before, so even if you are familiar with my music, this was a bigger project than I imagined. In fact, if you have the In Light of Eternity album, which was the last album that I released, that was originally going to be the Hearing Love soundtrack. And all that was my typical taking those small moments in like movie scores or a song that I appreciate, and it's like, oh man, I wish that was longer and I could just sit in it for a little bit. And so that's the reason for the length and the repetition of my loops, is because I enjoy that. But I enjoy it for the purpose of undergirding like prayer and meditation, my writing times and my reading times, and it just helps me focus on the reading and like the greater task at hand that I'm doing. And so it becomes like this beautiful, just underneath type thing. And so if you're familiar with my music, the Hearing Love soundtrack will be familiar territory for you, but this one is much more produced. There's dynamics, there's changing parts, and the whole album is meant to flow together as one whole work. And so you'll notice when you go over to Bandcamp, you can't buy individual tracks, because I would love for folks to be able to take in the whole soundtrack for the book. And so I feel like all my previous albums maybe were like tuning up until I got to this one. The Hearing Love soundtrack turned into something that I never thought it would. In Light of Eternity, again, it was sitting in my iTunes as the Hearing Love soundtrack, and other loops were being added to it. And it's just my typical instrumental stuff that's recorded from my times playing in the prayer room, or just when I feel like dinking around at the house and come up with a pretty loop, and I'm like, oh, I like that, I think I'll record it. They just come from those times, and so they're not like this big produced type thing. Some of the tracks in the past I've put more thought and work as far as production into than others, but for the most part they're just loops that I build up. This one was a big multi-track project for me, and there's 20 chapters in the book, and so there's 20 tracks. And when the book went past due in December and we're like, okay, it's not coming out, I sat on what is now In Light of Eternity. So I sat on the original Hearing Love soundtrack for a while. But what's different is In Light of Eternity, I was just collecting all those loops that naturally, get recorded through the span of just my day to day, and was going to release those as an album. But what happened is the Maris Enzo came out, which is a glorious pedal that turns your guitar into a synth, and it is just amazing. So my goal was, well, I have this album here, so I'll release the album and see if I have enough sales that come in to get this synth pedal. And I did. So thank you for everyone who purchased In Light of Eternity. I was able to get that synth pedal that I was after, but then I released the album, and now I have no more music for Hearing Love, but it was okay because we were past schedule and I didn't know when it was going to come out. And then Chad came along to edit the book, and he did quality work quickly, and the realization set in of, oh no, if I want to release a soundtrack for the book, I got to get to work. And then the quarantine happened, and so no kidding, we had this time span of 2 weeks where we were home and I did nothing but record. I was just so motivated, and just I didn't even have to try to come up with ideas just kept coming and coming, as far as ideas for the tracks and what I wanted the tone of each chapter to sound like, to set it up for the next track. And so it became like this whole big production in my mind as I flowed from chapter to chapter. It was just so much fun. So actually those 2 weeks where San Antonio was in quarantine is when pretty much the whole album came together. And it's been, honestly, I don't mean to say this in a marketing sense, like it's been my favorite album of all time from anyone, and I've been listening to it myself nonstop. And so it has that familiar flow where I do have longer tracks than normal, but for me they're shorter tracks, they're more produced, there's parts that build up and come down. If you have listened to the audio Bible and heard the Revelation soundtrack, there's some techniques that are reminiscent of that, which is my favorite soundtrack that I've done for the audio Bible so far, which is the book of Revelation. So a lot more produced, I have more percussion, I have Ali singing on many of the tracks, and so I wanted to go through the tracks with you and just kind of share like what I was thinking and a little bit of the background of the tracks, because when you watch a movie, you remember the feeling that you got from watching the movie and the score being a part of your visual experience. So when you do a soundtrack for a book, I don't know if anyone's ever done a soundtrack for a book, but I have. But anyway, I just felt like I wanted to create something musically that either one infused the spirit of what I was feeling, and by spirit I don't mean like a spiritual entity person, I mean like the life and the breath and the thoughts and the mind behind the chapter, like the feeling behind the chapter. And so I wanted to provide something musically that would infuse even the words of the book with just my own spirit of what I'm thinking and feeling. Or I wanted to see like what would be the natural temptation of the wrong spirit rising up in a reader who would be reading my words and maybe reading them in the wrong spirit. And so how do I counter that with the spirit that if you do what I'm talking about in the chapter, it will produce this kind of lighthearted type thing. And so anyway, I'm thinking about these things, and so instead of releasing the original Hearing Love soundtrack that again is in light of eternity now, it has been available for a while, I began to embark on this new project where I begin to be a lot more intentional and really consider the spirit and the tone and the feeling of each chapter. And it all began with the Supreme Court hearing for the Louisiana abortion case. We had a prayer chain in the prayer room that lasted about 30-something hours in total when all was said and done. And I was playing with one of the teams in the first several hours of that. And what I do when I play with the team and I'm playing my style, I'm usually not like a lead out front. I'm more of like a underneath and provide pads and textures for other people to play on top of and sound good. And so this is what I'm doing during my set, and we're in the key of C major, and I built up this pad that began to turn into this like synth pad, and it was a real big pad. And we had a time there where we just sat in that pad for a while, and I began adding like some slide work on the guitar where you have your slide, put some reverb on it, put a delay tail on it, and your volume's down, and you pick it with your slide, and then right after you pick it, you roll the volume in, and then you slide from like your 5 to your 3 or something, or your 1 to your 3 or whatever. And so I was putting the slide work into the track, and I just fell in love with that pad. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just, it's one chord, it's just a C major, but I really enjoyed just like the burst of yeah that it provided. And so I recorded it, and like, man, I think this is a really good intro for the Hearing Love soundtrack. So I got it, cataloged it, and then by this time enough money came in from the previous album so I could get that Maris Enzo synth pedal that I was talking about. And so the second track is no kidding. I'm trying to figure out this synth pedal and see like what my different options are and all the different noises. So the second track of Hearing Love, I really liked that loop that I put together, but that was just me dinking around with the brand new pedal that I had just got that evening, and I was trying to explore the different sounds and modes that I could get with it. So I wanted to just create a loop that I could put different parts and different types synths in there. So every single sound in track number 2 is just from that Maris Enzo, all the synth noises. And I really liked it, and I'm like, oh man, this is so cool. Like, I don't want to do anything else. I think it's sufficient by itself, but I really like the feeling of it, and it just felt like a very productive, like I'm doing a good thing. And so in that chapter, I focus on Mary at Bethany and how Jesus had pointed to her and said, she has done a good work for me. And it just felt like a very productive type, like, you know, I'm feeling confident. I'm choosing the good part. I'm doing a good work for Jesus, as he said of Mary of Bethany. And so it just has kind of this, again, the first 2 tracks just bam, like this excited, like set your vision, and just, I don't know what's coming next, but this is going to be awesome. And then you have this track that just sounds like confidence to me, and just a joyful confidence, not a pride or arrogance or cockiness, but just kind of a happy confidence. And then track 3 hits, and the title of the chapter is Nothing Against His Face. And it kind of sets a foundation and a tone for the rest of the book as we begin to look at the commentary on the Shema. And so that was something that I'm like, man, I want to drift back to a minor feeling. I want it to be a little bit eerie. I want it to be just kind of like, you know, you take that confidence and then just sit there and go, whoa. And I really feel like the track does that. I was working with the Chase Bliss mood pedal, and that's a little micro looper that you can put different effects on. And so just basically on a real high reverse micro loop, am looping a C sharp minor, like way up high on the neck, and it's just going, like repeating as an undertone. It just feels like this eerie, like high pitched thing that undergirds the whole song. And then everything is built upon that. So the album sets the vision, takes you to a light-hearted, kind of joyful confidence, and then just brings you to this sober type sound, where you're just, you know, again, just sitting there with like the woe feeling. But then track 4 is Hearing Love, and so chapter 4 is named after the book Hearing Love, where I look at John 17 and begin to inject some of the relational language into theology again. And so it's a joyful experience to begin to realize the cross of Christ didn't just open up a way for you to get to heaven, but it opened up a way for you to get to heaven so that you can know God. And so the joyful nature of that, you know, I remember as a new believer, like coming to the Lord and not knowing like fully what was going on, but it was so cool. It was beyond cool. So track 4 brings you into this kind of lighthearted feeling again. There's like all these sounds and stuff, and it's all stereo and stuff. So if you listen to the whole album in headphones or like stereo, it'll sound the best. But anyway, so you got like the stereo action of stuff going on around you, and it might be like overwhelming to try to figure out like what's going on musically, but it's still like this happy song that begins to pick your heart up again after the last chapter. Then we get to track 5. Now, track 5 is really the track that began to come alive when I started realizing the scope of what this work would be, and I began to get really, really excited. So track number 5 came from a loop that I played with Allie in the prayer room. She has a Wednesday night PM set from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, which is on the SA Tab live stream if you ever catch us. But sometimes has me take over as far as the main musical instrument. And typically for the singers to sing, I'll build up a loop and put like a percussion or something in there and build some other lead parts, and it just repeats, and the singers can sing over it. And there's things I can do dynamically to begin to like lift the dynamics, bring them down, and different things like that. So we recorded this loop, and I really liked it, and I wanted to record it, but the issue with doing live looping with the team is many times like my loops just aren't on point. So I recreated that loop instead of going with the original one, which I'm glad I did. It ended up so much better, a lot more things more clear and distinct. And I built it up. I got done with the track, but like I said in one of the in the dedication or the intro or something, but Allie has been one of the most instrumental people in my personal salvation, my personal turning towards the Lord, my personal sanctification, and just I owe Allie so much. And so it did not feel right to record track 5, which was my testimony. It's when love inclined my ear. And so chapter 5 in the book is all my testimony of just painting a little bit of background about how I thought and how I functioned, what happened to me before the Lord drew me into himself and awakened hearing, and I began to interact with him as a person. The first person I legitimately bonded with was Holy Spirit, and it was his bond that began to repair the deficiencies in the bond that I even had with my own wife, and now it's affecting others. And so Allie had to be a part of this track. And so after I filled it up, and she'd already sang to it and really liked the loop from the prayer set, and so she got on the harmonica mic, which is just a Shure little green bullet that we have that plugs into my guitar pedal board, and you sing in the harmonica mic. So that's the reason for kind of that old radio sound, but then it has a nice reverb and some delay settings on it as well that it has this background like ethereal type sounding thing. And so we do that a lot with Allie's voice on some of the tracks, but I really man, Allie, would you sing on this one? She did, and she helped me produce that song with all the layers and things that we had going on to build it, to decrescendo it. And so I'm just so thankful that she was able to sing. So that's the first one that she sings on. And so very special track for me, but that's when it began to open my eyes like, oh wow, this project is turning into something enormous besides just creating loops. And so the first couple tracks were really just me working with my loopers on my pedal board. Track 5 is when I'm working with loopers, but then I'm also doing multi-track stuff and timing everything and starting to throw in more percussion and things. So track 5 was an exciting track to work on, and then just again realize like the enormity of what the project was going to be. Now the next track is from the exposition on Proverbs 2, and what I chose for Proverbs 2 was something steady that would be the underneath. And now I recorded Proverbs for the audio Bible a few years ago, and I had this tremolo, like this ding, 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 after a reverb pad that I was doing chord changes that underneath a full wet bloom reverb on the Big Sky. And so I'm doing these chord changes, and the pads would take over, and then after that there's this tremolo that's basically a programmable volume pedal or volume switch. And so I programmed it so you had that real like ding, 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 ding sound underneath it. But I used that exact sound for the soundtrack for the Proverbs audio Bible. And so because chapter 6 is an exposition on Proverbs 2 on how to awaken your hearing, I kind of reached back to that old technique and grabbed a familiar sound from Proverbs. So it's from the Proverbs audio Bible, but then bringing that to be the foundation of this track. It's a whole new track, and I really like it. And so it's one of those that it starts out steady and it just continues to build and build and build. And so there's different pads with shimmer, there's different vocal pads, and things start getting intense. There's more slide work, and then all of a sudden it just, the vocal pads get to a climax, and then it just comes down and rests for a little bit, and then it comes to a close. And so anyway, I like that one because of the familiar sound from Proverbs and just kind of a nod back to the audio Bible. The next track is the shortest chapter in the book. It's called A Home Filled with Hearing. Originally with track 7, because it's a short chapter, I'm thinking transition track. And so I'm thinking something that would be kind of cool, but something that you would want to move on from quickly. And so originally I had this track that I thought was a cool sounding thing, but the more I progressed into the album and really began to enjoy how it was shaping up and sounding, the original track for number 7 just felt plainly out of place. So what's on there now is a completely different track. I ejected the idea that it should be a transition track, even though it still kind of functions as a transition track. I wanted something that would be more peaceful and more restful, because the idea of the chapter is that you're filling your home with all good and pleasant riches, and this is protecting you from demonic torment. And so the previous track that I had there sounded a little bit more chaotic, and in the flow of things, I didn't like it, and then when I began to ponder it, it seemed like very counter what that chapter is meant to be, because it really describes a place of rest that you have in knowing the Lord. And so it was the last track that I did after the whole album was done. I decided I just have to re-record that because this one is driving me nuts, and I know if I don't address it and I just leave it alone, it'll drive me nuts for the rest of my life. And so I re-recorded it, and now it is one of my favorite tracks on the whole album. It's just one of those just peaceful, like, I can sit here and just listen to it. And it's got this pad sound that I heard in a movie score in the early 2000s, and it's always stuck with me. And so when I dialed it in, and it just hit me like, oh, that's that sound that I've never been able to get. So I love that steady pad that's in there. It's one of my favorite pad sounds. It's just it's this hollow, like, ooh, it's just, oh, it's so cool. But then there's some other movement and things that I had going on with the Chase Bliss blooper pedal, which is a looper / delay / other weird things too. It's just, if you don't know what the Chase Bliss blooper is and you're a guitar guy, and you're into looping and maybe like textures underneath your playing, like, that pedal is just mind-blowing. I enjoy it. And so anyway, it's the blooper that's playing different textures underneath besides just me like playing a simple guitar line. But that became one of my favorite tracks. It's very relaxing, and I'm so glad I re-recorded it. And it is peaceful, just brings you to this place of peace. Now the next track, track number 8, is, I say at the beginning of the chapter, like, man, this is like the watershed juncture of this book, depending on how you respond to the material. And so I needed a track that was going to be serious and capture the weight of the material that's before us. And so that's the reason for coming back again after this relaxing time into this minor tone, very, very serious track. And I really like the end of it. I started playing with software filters. Most of my effects, actually all of my effects, to this point have just been off my pedal board. I just go all stereo analog when I record, and if it's not in my pedals, then it's not in my tracks. I made a few exceptions, and on this album, one was on this track at the very end. When the dynamics cut out, there's a stereo filter that's put over the end, and you'll notice a clear difference. It cuts the lows out, and then it has this bobbing back and forth between left and right as the beat is kicking in and out. And then what I started doing beginning in this track too is started to add a little bit more percussion than I did like in track 5. And so I have a lot more percussive stuff. I mean, for me, there's a lot more percussion going on in these tracks. And so this one was a serious track. I enjoyed playing with the software filters to get a really cool ending for that one. Still keeps you, I think, in a peaceful state, but it's still just a serious track to me that just puts you in a posture of sobriety. Then track number 9, after chapter 9, it's Keeping a Sensitive Spirit is the title. And so it's a constant fight in this world to keep your spirit sensitive to the Lord. And so I just wanted something that would kind of break from my normal tones. And so it starts with familiar tones. You have vocal pads that come in, and I play the vocal pads on my guitar with a combination of reverb, the vocal setting on the Mel 9 pedal, mixing that in with my dry signal, and some delay so the Mel 9 doesn't sound like a Mel 9, but it sounds like an actual filled out vocal pad. But the root of it is all the Mel 9. Then I have different reverbs doing different things on the tail end of that. But it just starts in with swells of a vocal pad, and then all of a sudden I take that Maris Enzo. It has a arpeggiator option on it. It's basically just playing a minor chord arpeggiated in a lower synth register. And so it comes in with this real fast synth bass line, and as vocal pads continue to come in and out, and then towards the end you have this shimmer pad that starts building it, and then it just drops out. Very, very short track because there's not much to the song except just that synth bass line that's repeating with the pad textures that are coming in and out. So really short track, and then it just drops out, and then the next chapter is on silence, sitting still before the Lord, and the benefits and the joys of sitting silent in prayer, and recapturing, again, just the beauty of silent prayer. So the next track is just silence, and all that is a very low volume, just steel pad. So if some of you guys are listening to the whole soundtrack and then that track comes on and it's not at a higher volume, it will literally be silent for about 7-8 minutes, I think, is the track. And there's a few other little things besides the pad, but it just brings you to that place of silence. So you have this real hyper, like, intense synth bass line in your face, and then it just like cuts out, and then poof, just sits you in silence for a little bit. And then after silence is the track is the track and so like when you read the chapter, and especially there's 2 chapters on the word "oh" from the Shema, "Hear, O Israel." There's 2 chapters on that, and when you read them, I think you'll get the intensity. But if you caught the single that I just released, with the picture of the Lord's Supper superimposed over a Social Security card, my friend painted that here many years ago, and I feel like that's such a beautiful image now. Now in light of what we're going through. And so I had his permission to use that for the cover art. But it's that track without the scripture reading. I actually originally recorded that track to be O. And so I'm thinking of O. It's all about Jesus's desire for you. And so his desire is deep, it's eternal, and it's the very desire that drove him to the cross. I mean, the angels rebelled and they asked for repentance. And God said no. Men rebelled and didn't ask for repentance, and he came after us, and it's his desire for us that drove him to the cross. And so it's like, how do I do a music track that honors his desire for us, that brings us into the serious nature, but then the passionate nature of his desire for us? And so there's like this groovy section before, and then it drops down into a longer pause. And for this track, I'm using drum loops, and then I'm using the K-oscillator and playing some of the percussion myself, but on a K-oscillator Pro Plus, if you're familiar with those are. It's not a MIDI, it can be a MIDI instrument, but it's basically one of those, all your instruments are in this little square. And so it's funny that it had a great timpani sound, I thought. So I was playing timpani on the K-oscillator, so I'm not like beating these things. When you hear the brr-bum and that break part, I'm actually playing the timpani on the K-oscillator. So it's on my lap, and I'm like, boom. But anyway, it sounds really big. But anyway, that's where that came from. So a lot more driving song, and even the groove is just more driving, doing some more slide work and stuff. And I did a lot more electric guitar than I usually do. I usually drift towards the acoustic guitar, but this album is pretty much all electric with very few exceptions. But anyway, we get to the break, and then this is the only lyric of the song is "oh." And so it breaks, and then it comes in, and when I recorded it, I've liked how the music came in, but I just continued as I listened to it. I had something rise up in me like, man, there just needs to be a shout, like, man, I wish Jesus can come down and just record like him, just screaming, "oh!" And so I just kept feeling this "oh" inside of me. And so I'm too embarrassed. I'm not a great singer. I'm too embarrassed to sing in front of people when I record, because I know how goofy you sound when you don't have music behind you. And so I just told the family one day, I'm like, I need to take the recording equipment to the house of prayer when it's empty. And so I set up the microphone and the computer and everything there at the communion table that we have at the front of the church. That's where I recorded my O's for this final part of that song, and I just let it out, and I didn't like most of them. It took me like 30 takes, but man, by the time I was done and got an O that I was like, yeah, I like that one, I'll keep that one in there, my insides hurt from screaming that O. But I'm glad I did it. I really enjoy having that element in there, and just being an intensifier to the intense music that's going on. And so that's one of the tracks where, if you're used to my normal music and you haven't heard the John 17:3 musical commentary single yet, then this will take you by surprise, because it starts in familiar territory, maybe some new, because there's percussion, and then you have the pads, some familiar ambient guitar tones, and then all of a sudden, like, here's this boom, boom, and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from, Dave? And so there's a lot of new things in this album for me. Not new for me, but new for, my ambient album. So anyway, I absolutely love that track. That's one of my favorite tracks on the whole album is Oh. And so I hope you enjoy that one too. The next one, track 12, just brings us down to this place of chill mode again, because the last track was so intense, but it's letting the intensity of his desire bring us to a place of quietness and calmness. Zephaniah 3:17 says that he will quiet us with his love, and so it just brings us into a place of quietness, but like a steady confidence, like we know he's steady. And so underneath the track, you'll hear this like underneath the track repeating. That's just this steady spot of like he's faithful, he's constant, and his steadfast love endures forever. And so you have this constant sound like cycling underneath, just a real chill track that brings you to that place of his delight has brought you to a place of healing, and now you have a beautiful confidence in him. Which brings me to the next track. This is the only track that actually has singing words and stuff on it, and the only track that is not exactly named according to the title of the book. The chapter title is He Is Mine, and I interjected that in there because that's part of the spirit of what's going on. But I got done recording this, and it was interesting because the blooper pedal, that going back to guitar effects here, the Chase Bliss blooper pedal has this scrambler thing on it. So what I did is I plucked a C sharp minor because I just wanted to see what the scrambler would do. I'm not even thinking recording mode. I pluck a C sharp minor, just dun 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 dun. I know I just sang a major, but whatever. I just plucked this chord, and then I did some filter things on it, and then I hit the scrambler. And when I hit the scrambler, I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is cool. It actually sounds groovy. It's like dun 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 dun. I'm like, what in the world? This sounds so cool. Like it'd be a shame not to do anything with it. So I recorded just that loop that was scrambled up. Oh, there's Allie staring at me through the window, interrupting my video. She's right there. Okay. So I recorded just that scrambled up loop, and that's all it is. It's not me playing, it's just a scrambled up C sharp minor that's just going over and over again. And then it has this every time it repeats, and so I'm like, oh man, this. So it's like I have to use this somehow. I don't know if it'll fit with the album or not. So I just recorded this, and then I recorded a synth part over it. Then I started putting like little percussive pieces in there. I played bass over it. I put electronic stuff, started producing it and putting breaks in there. I'm like, wow, this actually turned out really cool. And it's just this type thing. And so it's like the closest I'll get to club music myself, because I'm not a huge fan of it. But I really liked how that turned out. And it just, I took it, and it was just going to be musical, but Allie loves that kind of music. And so I took it to her, and I'm like, hey, babe, you don't have to. I'm not telling you you better sing on it, but I wanted to let you listen to this in case you wanted to sing on it. You could. So she decided she wanted to sing on it, and but the challenge was when I recorded the synth part, and you musicians listen to the chord changes, and the progression as far as the sequence of the chords stays the same, but the progression as far as like when I changed chords varies through the whole song, because I wasn't really thinking anyone was gonna follow me, and I'm just like building these things up myself, and didn't record it to a click. I recorded everything to that loop, and so just that every time that thing would repeat. So I recorded it to that, and so the chord changes were not constant. So Allie almost didn't sing on it because she's like, I can't sing to this. It's not consistent. But she continued to listen to it, and she got some parts that she liked. And so it's not like your typical song, what you would expect with verse, chorus stuff. It's one of the shorter songs on the album, and I just love her voice. We've always enjoyed listening to like electronic chill out music like Kai Kai and some others, and so we were listening to them and trying to mimic the production of their voice. And so what we did with her voice is we recorded 2 melodies, and then we recorded a third part, which was a melody an octave down. But you had one melody that was with clear enunciation, one melody with softer enunciation, And then you had an octave down with really, really soft enunciation, hardly any enunciation at all. But they're all following that same vocal line. And then on the clear one, a little less reverb. On the medium one, a little bit more reverb. On the low one, bigger reverb. So it just gave this airy, spacey quality to her voice that we really like. So that's how we produced that and got her voice to sound specifically like that. And we're trying to mimic some of the things that we've heard from the vocal work on Kai Kai and some others. And I really, really like the quality that came out with that. And it's a song all about like, I am yours and he is mine, and really captures the spirit of the chapter, just that confidence that rises up when you begin to realize like he delights in you, and his delight brings healing to you, and you realize like he's on your side fighting for you. And so it's just this confident chapter, and I love it because, you know, the Christian life is not all rainbows and sparkles in this world. And so, and while she's singing about like, I am yours, she says the line, this is my confidence. Then we have a tape ending to the song where the whole song just seemingly falls apart, and then you fall into this like static noise type thing that just sits there. So it's like you're rejoicing, like the song's like you're rejoicing in your confidence, and then all of a sudden she sings that last line of the confidence, the song breaks apart, you're left with that static noise for a little bit, and it's just like, you know, when the storms of life do come, like, where does your confidence lie? Does your confidence still lie when everything sounds good and the music's great, or when the music falls apart? Like, are you still going to be confident? So I kind of feel like that moment as just kind of this hidden, like this test of our mettle, the test of our confidence when the storms do come. And so I just thought that song turned out so well, which I wasn't planning on it. I was just trying to hear how the scrambler would sound on the Chase Bliss blooper, and it ended up being the foundation for this whole awesome song. And so I really appreciate Allie singing with me on that one as well. It's super cool to have her on multiple of the songs, but that was obviously a special one. It's the only song with lyrics on it besides Oh, where I'm going, oh. But anyway, so there's that one. The next one, track number 14, The Knowledge of God. And so now that you have this confidence and this song that just completely fell apart on you, now you're going into the Knowledge of God chapter. And it's an interesting track to me. And I use the Chase Bliss blooper again on this one. They have kind of this glitch mode where they drop out parts of your loop. And so it sounds glitchy. And I did this on purpose for just the spirit of the knowledge of God. So it brings you into this place where it's like, okay, you're starting to come into this place of peace, and you're enjoying the knowledge of God, and you're able to sit and, you know, just delight in his nearness, delight in the fact that you know him truly, but then being confronted with that, you'll never fully grasp the eternity and the fullness of the knowledge of God. And so the music glitching out, to me, just really represents that, you know, you're not going to be able to fully grasp him. So although you can enjoy this song truly, it's like you'll never hear the fullness of it because of the glitches. In the same way, you'll never like grasp the fullness of the knowledge of God. And I talk about how that doesn't mean you're not going to mature in your understanding. But I hit those details in the book. Get the book if you want to hear about the details of that. But anyway, I just felt like the track really just brings you to this place of peace, and you can enjoy it, but that's still just like there's this thing missing where it's this groan that keeps you pressing in of, man, I'll never fully know him, but I can know him truly, and I can know him more tomorrow than I know him today. And just keep pressing in no matter how much you know you can't grasp what you can. And so it's kind of the beauty of this track with the glitching in it that's going in and out. And I really like it. It's a peaceful track. I hope it's peaceful to you. And then that glitch just represents again the fullness of the knowledge of God that still eludes us, that we're reaching for more. The next track is still within the vein of the knowledge of God, but the foundation, it's on the oneness of God and the beauty of God. And so this is another one of those things where I wanted a track that would still be set a tone of quiet peace and rest, but then at the same time, like there's so much going on in the knowledge of God, it's like, how do I grasp this? And so I almost just imagine the noises that are in the track just kind of all around, like, oh, here's something over here, here's something over here, and trying to like make sense of all these pieces that are floating around. And I don't know if I'm not a linear thinker, so it's hard for me to think things and put them in a linear way. So this book was a great discipline for my mind that's naturally more like non-linear thinker. I have all this stuff and I can see how it can begin to connect, but it's just all this stuff. And so just in keeping with the knowledge of God chapters, and specifically the oneness of God, it's like all this stuff that's around, it's like, okay, I can see how it kind of connects. And so the music and the noises of that kind of create that image of like all this stuff I'm trying to grasp, but it's like, that's beautiful. And then something beautiful's over here, and it's like, I look over here and then I look over here. And so anyway, it's just like this track that represents the journey of a deepening understanding of knowing what he's like and what he looks like, and just those things. Now, I'm typically not like a blues player or a blues like listener, but I appreciate the style for what it brings. And so the next track is on the chapter You Shall Love, and it kind of points at the prophetic nature of the first commandment, and that word shall pointing to the disposition of the person who's given to know the Lord, that they will grow the fruit of loving the Lord. And just resting in the vision of the promise that you shall love him, and having just this peaceful confidence of I will love him, and setting your vision upon that and letting hope rise. And so like the blues style kind of gives me this posture of being at peace, but still it's just like, yeah, I can't wait for that thing to happen. I can't wait to love the Lord with my whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And actually I do now, but I want to love him more. And so anyway, it's just kind of like this head bob track. And so I love blues and their proper context. And I have some other textures like going with it, and a few different lead guitar parts that are going, left, right, and middle, and everything. And so it's just kind of just a chill track like You Shall Love. Now the next track, Protecting the Heart's Aim, it's when you kind of begin taking up more of this like militant posture of guarding, defending your heart, setting watch over it. And so I just wanted like this big synth pad type track, and even getting back to some of my older style, just building like the bigger pads, but more of kind of like this cinematic type pad of like, you're a warrior fighting for the things that are valuable. So it's just a big pad track. There's chord changes, so it's not like the first one. But anyway, it just seemed fitting for the chapter as we're coming into this like militant mindset of, being the warrior track of like the valiant warrior soundtrack type thing. And so anyway, but then I'm also wanting to set it up for the next one, which is Tending the Heart's Bloom, and that's track 17. Now, track 17, it could, even though it sounds like, Tending the Heart's Bloom, oh, that sounds nice and stuff, and so, like, a happy gardener going out to garden things. I mean, it's still an intense chapter. The farther along you get in the book, the chapters get more intense and more intense. And so Tending the Heart's Bloom can present like that happy gardener type light-hearted thing. And it could also be a chapter that begins to weigh heavy upon your conscience in the wrong sense. So what I wanted to do beginning in this chapter is start countering maybe some of the temptation to begin to lose hope and begin to just sit in darkness of, man, I can't do this. Man, this isn't possible for me to do this. And so that's the reason for the chapter. It's the only one that I play acoustic on, which again, normally I play acoustic, but it's just a real happy, got a little percussive thing going, playing some harmonics and just having a fun time picking the guitar. And it's a shorter track, but anyway, just real happy, lighthearted acoustic track. And then we move over into track 19, Love's Overflow of Perfection. And that's another pad-driven track, but with some tremolo giving some texture to the pads afterwards. This track seems like a perpetual build, like it's always building somewhere and it's gonna go somewhere. So it kind of brings you to this tense spot. And it's like, okay, we're getting tense, we're getting more tense, we're getting more tense, we're getting more tense. And it's just this repeating like building and building and building with no resolution. And it's kind of this picture of our sanctification, how we're continuing to grow and grow and grow in our holiness, grow in our love, and we're growing and growing and growing. But in this life, because we're always growing, there's not that finish line of, okay, I'm done growing, there's nothing more for me to learn, but still just on that intense journey that's continuing to build in intensity. And so that's why the song here just doesn't ever find that resolution spot. It just continues to build and build and build. And when you listen to it, you'll know what I mean, where it just brings you to the spot where mentally you feel like something's coming, something's coming, something's coming. We're going to resolve this, and then it doesn't. It just continues to build and build and build. The last chapter is named Love's Last Call. And now I wanted something for the end that would be a good crescendo track. I also remember like the track, he's outside, but you look super pretty. Okay, I'm gonna get my saw set up and then we'll do the...
Your seesaw was already seesawed up.
No, I'm gonna set it up after this. So I wanted something that would flow similar to the O track, where you'd come in with a groove, then bring it down, let it sit for a little bit, take it up, and then let it simmer. It is one of my favorite production styles. I don't know how common or not common that is. So that's what I wanted for the track. Now the rub here was, this is Love's Last Call. This is probably one of the most intense chapters of the book and really begins to lower the boom on the reader. And now my goal with this book, I'll explain this later in another video, but my goal in the book was really for even professing believers to question their salvation by the end of this book and go and spend some time in the appendix. And so if chapter 20 doesn't do it for you, then I'm not sure what will. Not saying that no one's saved, not saying that at all, but the church is filled with many, many people that have taken the Lord's name in vain. They've said yes to a marriage covenant, but then by their deeds they deny the covenant that they said that they were going to keep. And the church is just filled with false converts, people lethargic and dead in spirit. And like Jesus said to the church in Revelation, he's one of the churches in Revelation, you have a name that you're alive, but you're actually dead. And so I know that's prevalent in America, so my goal is for professing believers to actually seriously question these things and bring them to a point of true relationship with Christ. And so the chapter is intense. The warnings that I highlight that Jesus brings up in Revelation chapter 2, they're intense. And this chapter has the most potential to really just, because of that, strip people of hope and just leave them with a somber feeling that would rob them of vision and hope. And so I wanted a track that would be intense. It would be a good crescendo, be a good end, and then if you have it on repeat, it could be a good like feeder right back into the first track and repeat cycle. So I had a groove that was in a major key, but threw in some minors in there that kind of like soften the brightness of the major key. So I'm using like the 1 and rotating around the 3 chord. So I love that sound. It's a really beautiful sound to me. So the production goes as I outlined. And anyway, I feel like I accomplished that. It's a good crescendo song, I believe, and it picks up in intensity like the O does and have a good driving drum line. And I just stayed a while on that thing because I mean, it's the last song, it's the grand finale, it's all the fireworks going, and so just let it sit there. One of my beefs with music many times and listening to other people's pieces of work is like, man, I love that part. I just wish it wasn't 5 seconds because I could have enjoyed it longer. And so I hope that these things don't become like a nuisance to you, but I'm one that enjoys like a part if it's good. Like I enjoy sitting in it for a few minutes. I don't want like different parts to pass by too quickly. Like I want to sit in it and simmer in it and enjoy it. So that was the reason for the length of many of these, the length of some of the parts in the more produced songs. And so it brings you to this intense spot that just stays there. It's like a good like dancing and grooving song, I think. I don't know what dance moves you would dance to that, but anyway, it just seems like a really cool like song, very positive, leaves you with your spirits up and then just comes down and leaves you with this chill pad, and you have like the bass drum just like the doom 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 doom. And anyway, so I really like the song. I really like the album. I'm serious. Like, this is my favorite album of all time. And I'm not just saying it because it's mine. I'm not saying it because I want you to buy it. It is available. Again, it's the whole complete work, and it's all meant to go together. So I'm not selling single tracks over there. It was a massive project for me, and there's 20 tracks on it. And again, it was so much fun to work on, and I got it all done in the quarantine. It was amazing. So you want to know what I did with the quarantine? I basically recorded that album the whole entire time while Chad was editing the book. And then by the time I got done, he was almost done editing, so I was going in and got back into book mode. But it was fun just for those like 2 weeks to just focus on nothing but music. And again, I didn't force anything. Everything just came out naturally. I feel like the only thing I forced was the initial track for track number 7. That again, I went back and re-recorded, and I'm so glad I did, because that's one of my favorite tracks on the album. But thanks so much for making it this far if you did. I know it's a long video, but it's 20 tracks and it's a good album. I really enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy it too. Some of the music has been playing on my more recent videos, so you'll hear the familiarity of those things, but it's different when you hear it in the full scope of the work. And so anyway, you can pre-order that now at forloveoftheword.bandcamp.com, and again, that link will be in the description, and it will be released on August 3rd. So if you're watching this after August 3rd, you can just go over there and download it now and put it on and read the book to it. There might be spots where you're like, oh, I can't read because the music's so intense, so I'll just sit with the music. But anyway, that's available. Wanted to let you know it's available, but then also just let you know some background behind the album and behind the tracks. And so anyway, thanks again so much for joining me. Thanks for following the book. Thanks for following my channel. So again, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.